Okay, so welcome back, whoever's here. So this is just a shortish session from 1:30 to 2:15, and the point is to have discussion or do question and answer or whatever you would like in relation to the teachings that have happened so far or other questions that you have. So there are, Malgo, did anything reach you? Okay, so there's just a few on, comments here that I'll try to access. So the question that's come here for discussion is, why does one tend to feel the strong identity of the I in the head and or the heart, and not as pain in the big toe or the right elbow? So in response to this, I think the main point is, so while we can't settle on a sort of actual location for what's called the heart mind in Tibetan, it's not simply the mind, but more the heart mind, so that you understand that the emotions are involved as well, is that most of that activity happens in our heart chakra, if you like, which is seen traditionally as, if you want to put a location of the heart mind in the body, although it's not really possible, you think of it in the center of your chest, or else you think of it in your head, because that's where the thoughts and feelings happen, basically. And we don't have that same sort of process going on in the other parts of our bodies so much, or at all, in terms of our big toe or our right elbow. And so, yeah, when we have a strong identifying feeling of the I, it's generally, I think, in the center of the chest. And I think for some people, it can be in the head. I think that's why, because that's where the heart chakra is. That's the seat of our thoughts and feelings. Would anyone like to add anything to that? Or question further? Who's there? Yeah? Well, anyway, nobody's unmuted. So we'll take that as a satisfactory response. Just to settle on one. So there's another question about how present practices like Tonglen ask us to feel things in the depths of our heart, even though we're told not to identify the I. And what are my thoughts on this? So we're not, well, as I was just explaining, the seat of our thoughts and feelings is the heart chakra. So of course, when we're meditating, then that's a very powerful center to meditate on. And actually, we have to be careful not to meditate too single-pointedly, because we can actually cause disturbances in our body if we focus too tightly and too often and too intensely on our heart area. So there's a problem that comes that once you've met Tibetan Buddhism, you hear about, and you never hear about it before that. It's a condition called lung, which is a disturbance of the winds in the body. So this can happen if you do certain meditations for too long or too intensively on your heart area. So it's the separate issue, the emptiness of the I, or the identity of the I. I mean, because it's the focus of our thoughts and feelings, then the place to generate positive thoughts and feelings is from the heart area. And so that's why we do a lot of meditations that involve things dissolving into the heart or radiating out from the heart. So any of you can add anything at any time, by the way. If you just want to unmute and make a comment, that's fine. Hi, Rachel.
Hello. Hi. Can you talk a bit more about that lung that you mentioned?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, this comes up, and as Lama Zopa Rinpoche says, nobody knows about Lung until they meet Tibetan Buddhism. Then everyone knows about it. So there's no direct kind of Western term that covers it, but stress comes closest, I guess. So what can happen, and I think many of us have had experience of it without putting a label Lung on it. So when you're particularly upset or distressed or stressed about a situation, you know that you sometimes get pain in your body, particularly around your heart area. And also you may notice that your breathing pattern changes. It can become short and quicker. So that they're all indications of Lung. And along with that come disturbances of your appetite and of your sleep pattern. So basically, it's a kind of stress, and there are different, within Tibetan medicine, there are different labelings, different categories of Lung. And the most dangerous one is what's called Soglung or heart Lung. And that's this one that involves incorrect or prolonged incorrect meditation on the heart area that can disturb the winds so badly that people can actually go crazy, and it's said that people can even die with an extreme case of it. So it can be really physically incapacitating. And so meditators are taught by people who are guiding them in meditation to recognize the signs, because once you start to get these symptoms, and even we get these symptoms not in meditation but in our life, starting to get these appetite and sleep disturbance of breathing patterns, and sort of tightness in the chest and pains in the chest, it's an indication that you have to relax your mind, basically. So if you're meditating, then usually you would stop your meditation and go out. And what is really helpful for this kind of Lung is to go on a hilltop and have a really expansive view. So whether of a blue sky or of a distant horizon. So what you need to do is relax and open your mind. So it just comes from intense thinking in the wrong way, if you like.
Because that kind of scares me now. Because occasionally I like when I'm trying to find that I, that self, so I go inwards, and sometimes I can find that ball, and I try to poke it,
Yeah.
and then now that's making me wonder: is that a correct thing to do? Am I not supposed to be doing that?
Well, usually the meditation when you're searching for the I is not to find it. You don't find that ball in your chest. That ball in your chest comes when you're actually grasping at the I.
Oh yeah, so when I'm like imagining like what you were saying earlier, like imagining that pride, when someone criticizes you and pride comes up, and then
Yeah.
that's when I feel it, and so it comes in and I try to investigate it, and then
Yeah.
sometimes it just feels really solid.
Yeah. Okay. So that's fine. I mean, that's because of the grasping and the holding on. So what you're going to try to do is to soften it, right? So one way to do that is to actually just do that little meditation on searching for the I. Where is the I that's feeling so proud or so hurt or whatever the intense feeling is? And then when you search everywhere, including in your minds, your thoughts and feelings, and you find that you can't find it, then it kind of dissipates that hardness. I think it kind of dissolves it or melts it.
Because I'm so convinced that it's there sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes it just feels so solid. So I
Yeah.
kind of like imagine my hand just going through it, and then it feels a bit less solid, but sometimes it's just so real. I
Yeah.
don't know.
So what that is you have to realize habituation, in this life and in previous lives, to holding on to the self-grasping. And so you've got to do what you can to dissipate that feeling and just get it to dissolve. So whatever works for you in terms of getting it to dissolve. Yeah, just to soften it up, because it doesn't exist. It certainly doesn't exist in the way it's appearing to you.
Yeah.
And it doesn't exist from its own side. So anything you can do to grasp onto that and soften that feeling of hardness and intensity in your chest is helpful and healthy.
Okay. All right.
Yeah.
So I'm not gonna
Yeah.
go insane basically by doing that.
Okay.
Good. Thank you.
Okay. Okay. So what else have we got? Okay. So there's been a couple of questions related to kind of the worldwide situation. And there's a question here about how can contemporary Buddhism inspire and encourage the personal, political, and collective action for the benefits of all beings on the climate emergency and the extinction crisis? where there is ample scientific evidence on what to do about it. Example from Paul Hawking's Drawdown 2040, etc. So yeah, it's like, so it's not, I mean, some people have a view of Buddhism as a kind of passive philosophy, that you're encouraged to be almost fatalistic and just accept what's happening. So this is not true. You know, you can be an activist, and given the climate emergency and the obvious problems that we're facing, it's fine to be an activist. It's good for the world. But what you have to do and be careful about is to always be checking your motivation, your reason for getting involved, and the way that you are involved. So that's the important of, before you engage in any activity, is to check your motivation and make sure that you're not engaging in your activism or whatever you're doing, your marches or whatever, contacting politicians, whatever it takes, that you're not doing it out of a delusion such as anger or resentment. That's the important thing to be aware of. So it's fine to be involved, to be an activist, but you always have to be checking your motivation and your reasons for doing things, and making as your motivation as pure as possible, and always checking your mind for delusions, because of course, you know, often these situations are quite fraught. There's a lot of emotion involved. And so it's good if you can rationally just keep watching your mind, checking your motivation, checking the state of your mind, making sure that you're not making decisions or doing things out of the wrong motivation, because that then pollutes the whole outcome. So some valuable advice that Rinpoche gave me that I had to use quite a lot during this last year when I was involved in the committee at Chenrezig. He was asking me about one point about how things were going here at Chenrezig, and he was asking about the nuns. And I was saying to him that we quite often have quite fraught nuns meetings, you know, with people getting a lot emotional and sort of disagreements about things. And so the Rinpoche gave me this excellent advice that helped me a lot during the last year. He said that if you're in a meeting and you get emotional, so, and by emotionally, he means you're acting out of delusion. So you're either your attachment, your ignorance, your anger, your jealousy, or whatever. That he said, even if the decision that's reached by that meeting is the right one. So I think by that he meant, by the right one, he meant the one that benefits the most people. He said, if you've approached it through emotion and you've become all emotional about it, it's like you've put kaka, which is the Tibetan term for shit. You've put shit on that decision, even though it's the right one that benefits others, because of your sort of negative emotional thoughts, which we sometimes see as passion or something, or, you know, trying to get our points across. But he said, yeah, that actually taints or pollutes the decision you reach, even if it looks in objective terms to be the right decision. So I tried to apply that in a lot of meetings where I just tried to be calm, rational, and patient about the decisions I was making, because I knew that if I got emotional about it, then it's like you're operating out of delusion. And yeah, the decisions you make aren't good ones. They're polluted ones or tainted ones. So I don't think there's any other questions there. So does anyone have anything they'd like to ask, or I might not have seen all the messages?
Oh, yeah. I have one question. I have two questions.
Two questions.
No,
Okay.
no, one is about karma, but the another arises now with these emotions.
Okay.
But I need to formulate it. So, because it's emotions are, because all decisions based on emotions are not good, or just based on the anger and attachment.
So there Rinpoche didn't specify, but I think he's talking about negative emotional thoughts, you know, not about the positive ones like out of compassion or love or whatever. He's talking about the ones where you're getting all impassioned because of your attachment to a certain outcome or your ideas about how things should be. And so if you're operating out of attachment or anger, or we're all operating out of ignorance, no choice until we realize emptiness, or jealousy or envy or these kind of things, then that is what's tainting the decision you reach. And you can see that in meetings here at Chenrezig Institute, right? That someone's got a hobby horse and is quite impassioned. And sometimes I just want to share that advice with them that, you know, just be calm, just be patient, just present your point rationally. But when there's this attachment to the outcome, then it's not a pure outcome, even if you do reach a decision that benefits a lot of people. Yeah, so it's the negative emotions that he was advising against. Yeah.
Okay, good. So my question is about karma.
Yeah.
So it's from today and from yesterday. So yes, I understand. So it's about a collective karma.
Yeah.
So is it working in the same way like the one person karma? Like it was said yesterday that, you know, we have this karma, and if we did something wrong, even if the person is good now and something not good happens, right? It's a, you know, past karma.
Yeah.
So to ask this, so what about, for example, nation like Tibetan people who are experience so much suffering? Is it also by some past not good stuff of those group of people? And the same is about gender karma. Also, if we could say something like this, that the women have also some past, right? Okay. And also I understand that sometimes we are born like as a man and women, but also it's a question if we could say it's a collective karma of some. I think it's easier to answer on the first about nation, because then it becoming more complicated. But
anyway,
this is what I was thinking. Yes,
and others can feel free to join in. So collective karma, I've not seen it discussed in detail in the text, but they do give examples of certainly not to the level of millions of people or thousands of people, but they do give examples of, say, 20 or 30 people being involved in the negative karma of, say, killing a cow or something, and that they all share in that, and then it ripens later as suffering. So then I guess you would just extrapolate from that there are things that happen. So you know, countries going to war with other countries, then there are thousands and hundreds of thousands of people sometimes involved collecting negative karma. And so in terms of Tibet, you know, sort of more than 1 million people being killed with the invasion, then I don't know, you can't say, was there some event that 1 million people were involved in? But it may have been, like I sometimes think about countries like New Zealand and Australia that have strong agricultural backgrounds, you know, where a lot of sentient beings, a lot of animals are raised to be killed and to be eaten. And what the karma is that. And in terms of indigenous peoples in any country, you know, the karma that's created for this entity that's a nation, where they've actually slaughtered and poisoned and got rid of the indigenous people, you know, what kind of karma is that creating? So in terms of Tibet, I mean, often when we first meet Tibetan Buddhism, we have this rosy view of, you know, how it was and how, you know, Tibetans are. But in actual case, when you read the text, even the Lamrim text, a lot of the examples they use are talking about robbers and how you have to protect yourself from being, you know, from things being stolen from you and from being killed and all these different things. So it wasn't like the Tibetan people were these like pure practitioners, all pure practitioners, and it's outrageous that this happened to them. And the 13th Dalai Lama wrote a famous will that predicted exactly what was going to happen to Tibet. And what he was pointing out was the kind of corruption in government that was happening and that needed to be reformed. And both the 13th Dalai Lama and the 14th Dalai Lama, even as a teenager, was trying to institute some reforms in some areas to try to make it a fairer society. So who knows, because unless you've got the mind of the Buddha, you can't say, you know, what caused that collective karma. But the way it's seen is, yes, if a group of people indulge in a negative karma, they share a negative result from that. But in terms of nations and millions of people, I've not seen explanations of that. So in terms of the gender issue, so I mean, you'll know from reading texts that traditionally a female rebirth is seen as an inferior rebirth, and even the Tibetan term for a woman was something that indicated that inferior rebirth. And it's difficult, again, without clairvoyance, to separate the cultural standards of a society from actual Dharma, you know, what's the Dharma approach. But generally what it's said is that, you know, a female rebirth is an inferior rebirth. And I actually had a friend who, Lama Yeshe, advised that she should pray every day to be reborn male. So he said to her that the problems she was experiencing in this life were because she was born female. And in terms of, I won't go into her personal details, but in terms of her, the story I knew of her life, it did make some kind of sense. But I think, you know, and then you've got these things like the way Buddhists set up nuns and monks, you know, that traditionally even a nun who's been a nun for 50 years, say, should sit behind a novice monk, a junior monk who's just been ordained for 5 minutes. So of course, Western women, when they heard this, were like, what, this is outrageous. So Lama Yeshe, in his skillful means, what he did, instead of having the gompas set up that all the monks sit at the front followed by the nuns, then he divided the gompa down the middle and made one side for the monks and one side for the nuns. And that ended a lot of argy-bargy about that. But what you have to understand that even Buddha, close to the time of his death, when he was talking about monastic rules, said that, unfortunately for us, he didn't specify, but he said some of them were cultural. They were to do with the culture of that time, and that in the future they could be changed. But I think what's happened is, I think it takes a meeting of a lot of councils of monks and different people to actually change rules. So that's not so easy to do. But I think the way women are seen will change as cultures change, as women get more parity, more equality with males, then I think, yeah, things will change. And for me, because when I first came in, I read things like Shantideva about the ugliness of a woman's body and these kind of things. I was like, what? And then again, it's understanding the context that he was teaching to a kind of temple full of young monks with lots of hormones raging. And of course, you're going to try, you know, it's a celibate lifestyle. So you're going to do what you can to get them to not be attracted to female bodies. But it applies equally, if that's your object of attraction, to whichever type of body is your object of attraction. It's a method for dealing with attachment, is to see the ugliness, not necessarily the only method. And then the defining thing for me was once I'd heard that every single living being has Buddha nature, and every single living being has the potential to become a Buddha, whether male or female, and there's no distinction, especially at the level of Tantra, then for me, I just relaxed about it. I just saw a lot of it as cultural, and that it will slowly change over the years. And as long as women are seen as having the same potential for enlightenment as a man, I'm not too worried about the other details. And I think slowly, as you're seeing, there are now more female teachers coming through and being recognized and respected. And I think unless we get into a really degenerate age, that will steadily change. But personally, I have no inclination to pray for a future male rebirth. But I mean, of course, the sensible thing to do and the thing we're encouraged to do is to pray for the rebirth that's of most benefit to others, you know, which may be male and may be female, depending on the situation. Yeah. So anything else anyone has to ask? Bettina?
I have.
We can't hear you.
Oh, okay. I'm here. Can you hear me?
Yeah, can hear you now. Yeah.
Yeah, I sent a message, but I'm not sure if it went through. So.
Oh, okay.
And I know this is about me, not about others. However, I have a sister who's suffering and is very angry and has a very fixed view, blames everything, like all that stuff that you said in the first two paragraphs. And I see her suffering with all this, and I just want to be with my sister, and we don't live nearby, and she just cuts more and more people off. Her world is narrowing as she sees others as more hostile. Yeah. And I want to keep in contact without annoying her. And I found that meditation very helpful. But how can I be with somebody who is, I'm sure she's soft on the inside, but very prickly on the outside and pushes more and more people away? Yeah.
So, yeah, and also because you have a strong bond if it's your sister. So it's those kind of long-term things like patience. It's doing those kind of meditations like Tonglen. And, you know, like you could visualize taking on her anger and resentful feelings, you know, and then giving her happiness. And then it's like, yeah, but it's difficult because angry, prickly people are rather difficult to talk to, and especially if she has a fixed mind, to change her mind about things. So the most you can do, I think, is pray for her, be patient with her, and try to lead by example, you know, by the way that you interact with people. And when you're with her, without antagonizing her, if she's saying harsh things about other people, then just gently and skillfully try to introduce another way of looking at the situation. You know, try to get her to see that it's her fixed mind and her fixed view that's causing a lot of the problems. But it depends on her personality, whether she's even interested in changing, or, you know, I mean, it sounds like she must be miserable, but it's quite amazing how resistant people can be to actually getting out of that misery and changing their minds, because that does take a lot of work. Somehow the kind of miserable little hole that we've dug ourselves into is it's what feels familiar, and it's hard to get out of it. But from your side, I think prayers, patience, and when you can, just trying to give her a different view of situations.
Thank you very much.
Okay. So anyone else have anything to ask or comment on? Oh, there's Jen's. Jen, are you there? The iPhone.
Yes,
Would
yes,
so
I'm here, Elsa.
yeah. So Jen actually sent through a poem, which I guess you composed quite a while ago. Is it? It's from.
Yeah, it did. Yeah, a few years ago now.
Anyway, so it's related to thought transformation, and she'd quite like to share it with the group. So if you'd like to read that now, that would be good.
Oh, I'd love to. Yeah, it's called A Miserable Day, and it comes from my book, Life's a Mango. Are you sure it's really a miserable day? The rain is falling, the sky is grey. It's just the weather. It's what you said. The thought of misery gets locked in your head. When something happens, the thoughts that you bring change the suchness of nature, distort everything. We start to make stories about stuff and we moan. The stories take on a life of their own. The misery you feel is not from what happened. It's the thoughts you impose that make you feel rotten. It is what it is. She did what she did. Let go of the story. Accept what is lived. It's the layers we add to the suchness of life that get us in trouble and cause us such strife. Be calm and be still. Let go of the thought. It won't make things better. You'll only get caught. Forgive them their actions. Realize it's true. They are where they're at. It is good for you. Just know that things happen and they always will. Drop interpretation. Be present and still.
Okay, thank you. That relates very closely to some of the things that have been mentioned over the last day or so.
Yeah, thanks, Elsa, for the opportunity to recite. Thank you.
Okay. So any other questions, doubts?
Can I ask another question?
Yeah, sure.
So especially when habits are like really ingrained and we try to do this, but it feels like we're not making any headway.
Yeah.
I don't know. I guess I'm looking for a silver bullet, which I know doesn't exist. But I don't know. Do you have any tips, I suppose?
Well, again, it's those sort of long-term things like patience. It's not easy to change a habit. I was talking about that yesterday, you know, and even in terms of if you're a smoker in this life and you give up, you know, it's very difficult to do. And so in Buddhist terms, we're talking about habits we've acquired, maybe not necessarily in this life, but over many lifetimes. You know, the way we grasp at that self-existent I, we've been doing that for beginningless lives. So it's not easy to change our views, even on simple things like smoking, let alone on sort of more subtle things like the way we grasp at our I. So I think it's like anything, you have to see the disadvantages of whatever habit you're trying to break and the harm it causes you and others, and then look at the advantages of not having that particular habit, and the benefit for you and for others if you could break that habit. And then you have to just keep applying yourself. And of course, you know, spiritual practice is like anything. You go through different periods, and sometimes you're quite elated and everything seems to be going well and falling into place and you're understanding things. And then other times nothing seems to be working. There seems to be obstacles you don't even understand, and you wonder whether you have faith and those kind of things. So I think as a Buddhist, it's quite important when you're going through those difficult periods when you've been maybe trying to change your mind in some way and you just feel defeated that you're not making any progress. I think at those points, it's quite important to rely on prayers. You know, that if you have faith in your guru, if you have a teacher that you feel particularly close to and you have a lot of faith in, and in Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, that, you know, you rely on the power of prayer to get you through those kind of grim periods that come for everyone. You know, it's not like this is like some, you take off like an airplane and you go up, up, up and up. You know, there's quite difficult periods, you know, when you really question, you know, like there's many of us who at points question our beliefs. You know, do we really believe in reincarnation? There are times, for example, when monks and nuns question whether really they should be ordained. You know, what does it mean? But hopefully the thing you hold on to is the inspiration that comes from a guru. And so when you're having these lean periods, then if possible, of course, these days it's difficult. But I know some friends of mine who, when they're going through these kind of periods, then they try to go to where their guru is and be in his presence, right? And take teachings from him. So at the moment, difficult, but you can go on YouTube. Most teachers are on YouTube, and you can do that for inspiration. Yeah, so sometimes you just have to be patient. You just have to wait for that, you know, rely on impermanence. It will change. You have felt good about everything you're doing before, and it will come around again. It will change. The bad periods will end. And in any kind of activity, it's like it goes through these phases, doesn't it? It's like when you learn to ride a bike, you know, initially you're hopeless, right? You keep falling off and you go the wrong way and you hurt yourself. But you have to keep trying. You have to keep getting back on the bike and steering it. And then, you know, you go through this awkward phase where you can kind of stay up and you can go in one direction, but it doesn't feel natural. And then if you persist, then driving a car is similar, right? So if you persist and just keep practicing, just being patient and applying the practices, then at a certain point it becomes effortless. Like if you're a car driver, then experienced car driver, you can be thinking about 1,000 other things, but you're still a safe driver because you've got that training. And it's what we're aiming for in thought transformation. They actually talk about that. But of course, given the period they were written in, they're talking about being an experienced horse rider. So, you know, whereas someone who's not experienced has to concentrate really closely on what they're doing when they're riding a horse. Once you're experienced, like an experienced car driver, it becomes effortless. You can think about and do other things, and you make the right adjustments, even though it seems like you're not paying attention. So we need to just have the patience and persistence and the faith in the things that we're doing to get us through to that stage where, and that's what they say in terms of realizations. You know, like in terms of bodhicitta, achieving bodhicitta, there's the early stage that's called contrived, or, you know, sort of, they have different terms for it, but basically contrived bodhicitta. So it's kind of fake it till you make it. You know, you don't have the actual realization of bodhicitta, but it's what you're aspiring to develop, you know, to have that precious thought that cares more about others than yourself and sacrifices self for others. And so you kind of fool yourself, you contrive and you make prayers. And then when you actually have the realization, it's effortless. You never have to think about it again, because you've achieved the realization of bodhicitta. And that's naturally what comes up. You have no single, it's pretty amazing to think about. You have no single thought of yourself and only think about the welfare of others. And then fortunately for us in meeting lamas, then we meet living examples of that. So we know it's possible. And if you have a pure wish to attain that state, then it keeps you going during those difficult periods when you're trying to break habits that are difficult to break. Okay?
Okay. Thank you so much. That was good.
Okay.
Sometimes it just feels like I just need a pep talk, because technically I've heard this all before, but it's just so easy to forget.
I know,
and
yeah.
Get caught up in our own stuff. Like
yeah.
what you said, it's hard to do it when you have suffering right in the face.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that's why we need to be aware of these methods and practice in these little ways, so that when the big challenges come, we've already got like the armory that we need to defeat the delusions, you know, because we practiced in little ways. But it's not easy. And it's like one thing I really enjoyed in preparing for this course was that I was reading, because, you know, there's this expression in Tibetan where they talk about how to make leather flexible in the old days, they used to knead butter into it with their feet and hands, you know, and it makes it flexible. But the actual butter bag, the bag that always has the butter in it, becomes really stiff and hard. And so they liken that to like a long-term practitioner, right, who's around the Dharma all the time and saying the words and doing whatever, but actually nothing's moving in the heart. Whereas as a newer practitioner, sometimes the message goes right into your heart straight away and you become quite soft and flexible. But the danger of being around is that you could be saying the words, but nothing much moving in your heart. So you're like that hard butter bag where, sure, you're holding the butter and can maybe even teach Dharma and meditate on Dharma, but nothing's actually moving your heart. So we have to be careful not to get caught in that also. Because sometimes, for example, we have all these Dharma phrases that we say over and over again in prayers. For example, all sentient beings, you know, we're doing everything for all sentient beings. But then we forget that, you know, the sentient beings that are around us are the ones we have the chance to show kindness to. But we're off praying for all sentient beings and maybe being unkind or impatient with the people we actually deal with. So we have to be careful that it's not theory, you know, that actually when we're talking about, and sometimes I read a book by Alan Wilson, it'll come to me. Wallace, B. Alan Wallace. And so he was recommending not to use that phrase, all sentient beings or all transmigratory beings, but actually use every, so that it makes you aware of, it's not some big mass of people out there, but it's every single living being that you're coming across that you're supposed to be doing your practices for and helping where you can in a practical way. So yeah, we have to be careful not to be that hardened butter bag and be open to the Dharma and actually do the hard work it takes to change the mind. And that's what we have to realize, that it takes a long, long time. So when did I meet the Dharma? I met the Dharma, it's embarrassing, almost 40 years ago, you know? And really, I can see some changes, but yeah, I wish I was like an Olympic athlete and dedicated hours a day and kind of trained and made steady progress. But sometimes it's hard to see the result. And we're all kind of achievement oriented, if you like, or result oriented. So it's hard not to think. But then you notice in just little ways, the things that if you persist, if you keep, and this is why we need to do daily practice, ideally some morning and evening practice, so that we remind each other on a daily basis. And of course, some days you're so distracted by what's going on in your life or the way you're feeling that it's just a blur, you know. You just, like, I have some mornings where I think, oh, did I do that particular prayer? Because I don't remember doing it, but I assume I've done it because I always do my prayers in the same order, you know, so I assume that commitment was done. It can be mindless, you know, and because we like to achieve goals and we like to see progress happening, it can be frustrating. But if you do persist, then you'll have those days when suddenly that phrase that you've been reading without really thinking about it for years means something and actually moves your heart, you know. And I think those little experiences are so precious. It's what keeps a lot of us going, you know, just that little positive feedback every now and then. And then I think gradually, and I don't think, you know, of course, many of us, and I was included in this when we first met the Dharma, we're going to get enlightened in this life, you know, we're all going to be Milarepas. And it takes a while to get realistic about that. And His Holiness is quite good on that. You know, he says not you know, that for him, because he was saying many people find Milarepa kind of exciting and inspiring, you know, he created so much negative karma, purified it intensely in that life and became enlightened in that life. And, you know, there's also these stories of miracles and things that happen with different lamas. and His Holiness is quite pragmatic and grounded. He said that actually he quite likes reading the life stories of the simple people, the simple lamas who didn't come in with all this fanfare about how they could read when they were 2 years old and they came out of the womb reciting mantras. But he quite likes the ones where you can see where it was a lot of solid, hard work and gradual progress. And he said for him, that's more encouraging than stories of miracles and amazing achievements. The story of making steady, gradual progress over a lifetime, and that's what I've now come to think, we're not only thinking over this lifetime, you know, that over many lifetimes. So for me, what I'm hoping is happening is that I'm placing enough imprints on my mind so that when I'm reborn next life, that hopefully in some kind of situation that's harmonious for Dharma, that I start off a little bit ahead, that I don't waste all the years I wasted in this life finding the Dharma and then having to, but the imprints will ripen so that I am familiar with Buddhist concepts, I am familiar with Buddhist practices, and hopefully familiar with being in Buddhist robes, that becomes a life that I very quickly and naturally go towards. But it may not be like that, because as the world's changing, as things are degenerating, and it's said that, you know, even in terms of ordination, it'll become more and more difficult to become a monk or nun. And what made me sad, there's a period in the future, who knows how many 100 years away, where it's called wearing the mark of ordination. So it reminds me of those monks in Tibet, you know, who take their robes off at the end of the day and go home to their families. So it said that during this period, there'll be people walking around looking like monks and nuns, but they won't actually be holding the vows. So my hope is that the ordination lasts long enough that I've created enough imprints to be reborn in some situation where I can continue to follow the path. And then, who knows, in some lifetime, developing realizations and becoming enlightened. So that's what keeps me going. So is there anything else?
Yes, there's just one more from me, Ailsa, and that was yesterday you mentioned a great teacher who'd taken a rebirth, reincarnation in Australia and was teaching, I think you said in Victoria, but I'm not sure you mentioned the teacher's name.
No, he's Tibetan and he's educated in Tibet, but it's just that he now has centers and does teaching tours and is currently located in Geelong. So his name is Dzogchen, Dzogchen, Dzogchen Rinpoche.
Right, thank you. Great.
And he's a very high Nyingma. He's a very high Nyingma Lama, and both Lama Yeshe and Lama Zopa Rinpoche knew him because he also studied in the Gelugpa school. So he studied at the monastery in Dharamsala that's associated with His Holiness's monastery. He did philosophical studies there.
Great, thank you. Thanks so much.
Okay, so it's 2:15 now. So if there's nothing else, then we'll take a break for half an hour and then we'll meet again at 2:45 and we'll do the concluding. We still have half a text to go, but we'll go through that fairly quickly because the ones I wanted to spend time on were these how to use suffering in the path to enlightenment. But we will complete the rest of the text, but it might just be mostly reading and a little bit of commentary. So see you in half an hour or so. Thank you.